Oh, wow. So I started acting when I was around 5 or 6. I was one of those kids that was involved in like theater and performing arts and show choir and dance and all of those things in school. And I did have pretty traditional Chinese parents. So it was always such a dichotomy because they were like, they were relatively supportive, I would say, for being pretty traditional, as long as I still kept my grades up and stuff like that. And I think they thought it was a phase for so long. And I was just involved in theater and musical theater and doing plays and everything all throughout middle school, high school. And then I ended up majoring in it in college. And I think by then, like a decade later, they were like, oh, maybe it's not a phase. Like, you want her to be a doctor and lawyer, but it doesn't seem like she's growing out of it. So it's just something that I've always done my whole life. And I've always had a passion for performing.
When you look at your career as a whole, who or what's had the biggest influence, either personally or professionally?
You know, I think a very formative time in my career was actually when I worked in Asia. So I graduated college when I was 19. It sounds very impressive, but once again, I was a theater major. I wasn't like a, double E engineering major, but I graduated at 19 and I signed a contract over in Asia, in Hong Kong specifically. And I ended up working in Hong Kong and Beijing for about 5 years, from 2010 to 2015. And back then, it really was like the wild, wild west. The China, um, film market and business was just taking off. And I feel like I was there right at the beginning when there was like such a huge, influx of money and, everything was kind of flourishing. And I think those 5 years in Asia really shaped, I think, the actress I am today, just because it was wonderful to be able to work in different countries, to connect to my roots. I am, have very strong ties to my Chinese culture. I do speak fluent Mandarin, but it was really good. And it made me appreciate a lot of the things about the States as well, actually, because when I
Mm.
came back in 2015, it was just nice to compare, the different experiences and to bring the things that I learned over there over here. And also, really gave me a sense of appreciation for the things that, how the business runs here.
Yeah, and you've had a lot of success already in your career. When you look back, is there a moment that stands out to you?
Honestly, meeting Josh was probably one
Mm.
big moment for me. And I actually met Josh a couple of years before we shot the Combien. I worked with him on a short film for the Swire Company, which is a big sort of corporation out in Asia. They own like Cathay Pacific and all of the Swire properties in Hong Kong. And the first project we worked together was a corporate short film. And although it was corporate, it was 15 minutes. It was a proper, storytelling. It wasn't an ad, but Josh, got to put some of his artistic vision and spin on it. But it was definitely different than his first feature because it being a corporate short film, there's ad agency, there's, clients to make happy, all of these things. But the very first time I worked with Josh, I felt like there was a really, really powerful and special connection between us. I feel like we really understood each other, when it comes to him being a director and being the artist and being the vehicle for his vision. And that's why I was so thrilled when he called me and told me, Kara, I have the script. It's my first feature. I want you to read it. And I'm just so honored that I was able to go back and work with him on that.
Perfect segue. Can you tell us about the Combion and your character in the film?
Yeah. So The Calm Beyond is kind of a post-apocalyptic thriller, which is actually very character driven. I always tell people it's kind of like a cross between Waterworld and Castaway meets a little bit of Mad Max. Now that you've seen it, I'm like, there's
Yeah.
elements of all of those things. And it focuses on a girl named Asha, which is the girl I play. And we see Hong Kong, don't know when specifically, could be in the near future, where the city has been fully flooded because of climate change, and she has been isolated in the top 3 floors of a building, as she deals with, themes of grief and
Yeah.
trauma and loss. And she's just basically been living by herself and finding a way to survive in this new dangerous world, because now, that the world, lots of, the world has been submerged in water. There are, kind of these like water pirates. It kind of shows how human nature, the ugliest parts of human nature, can rear its head when we are all put in this type of world where we need to survive. And then a little girl kind of just comes into my life and gives me a new sense of purpose to live.
And this is such a personal story to Josh, and your character was born from his first experience with cancer. Did that bring a different weight slash responsibility to this role?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. 100%. When Josh first sent me the script, he was like, just read it and then let's talk about it. I read it. I loved the story in itself, even before I knew, sort of what was the story behind it, because I was like, wow, incredible. Kick-ass Asian heroine,
Yeah.
like so nuanced, so three-dimensional, so many layers. And then when I finally got to talk to Josh about it and learn about where this character came from and how it was inspired by his own personal journey, like you said, there was a lot of pressure, even though he tried to alleviate that pressure, to make sure I was doing it justice and honor. And, it is born out of his personal experience, but I think about so many people in the world who have gone through their own battles and experiences of trauma and grief. And, it's so interesting because I always think about we shot this film mid 2019 before the COVID pandemic. And we had no idea, obviously, that, the next 2 years would be such an absolute shit
Yeah.
show. And it's crazy because I think about now that the film is coming out this year, how it hits so differently.
Yeah.
How everybody in the world, when you watch this film, has almost like this universal understanding of isolation, trauma, grief that perhaps people didn't have in 2019. At least this universal understanding of what it's like to be isolated. And it's just, the timing is very, very interesting. But, from a small scale to personal stories to a larger scale of the pandemic, I think, a lot of people will be able to relate to it.
That I've really appreciated about you is you've used your platform to talk about your experience in the industry, and that, when you were starting out, there were less fully fleshed characters like we see today for Asian creatives, and often there were stereotypes and tropes. When did you start noticing that shift in the industry, and what advice would you give to up and coming Asian creatives that are looking to break into this industry?
That's a great question. So, one of the reasons why I went to Asia in the first place is because of many of the reasons you said. I felt like it was really frustrating to continue to go out for these very two-dimensional characters and tropes. And I wanted to go to Asia and see what they would, that market could provide me. Around 2015, when I came back, is actually when I first started feeling that cusp, that wave of, oh, okay, now I feel like it's important to come back to the States and fight for the Asian American identity, because that's
Mm.
also different than just the Asian identity.
Yeah.
How that identity in itself, we are trying to establish, how our belonging in this country, in America, and how we are just as American as anybody else. But I feel like a very, very clear moment in that cinema, landscape was when Crazy Rich Asians came out. I think that switch was very, very clear, even though I feel like there has been a wave cresting already. um that was like a clear moment that I feel like the community finally rallied together. It was our first big blockbuster since Joy Luck Club 10 years before
Yeah.
that, which is insane, and to see the success of its box office numbers. And I feel like that movie really launched what we are seeing now, which is kind of this momentum of continuing to want to bring authentic storytelling for AAPI representation to the forefront, and to continue pushing the needle, and to continue, pushing these projects forward, greenlighting them, writing them, acting in them, all of it, like you said, Asian creatives.
Yeah, and throughout the film, we see your character's grief manifest itself, both physically, emotionally, and mentally. As an actress, how did you create the space for yourself to dive into all of those different aspects?
Josh was extremely, extremely helpful once again to be able to share his personal experience of everything he went through when he was creating this character and creating this world. I think the theme of grief is something that everybody has dealt with, whether it be in small doses or unfortunately larger doses. And I think from when I was shooting this film, I would say that I actually was of the I don't know if that's the right term, but the luckier few, that I feel like I haven't experienced extreme, extreme grief in my life at that point. And so I did draw a lot from Josh and from the people around me, I think, who have, who are so generous and open with their stories to allow me to, use my empathy to try and step into their shoes and see what is it like when you have to pick up like the pieces of your life after something really, really big happens. So that's sort of how I created this space to, create this character fascia for myself.
You're talking about authenticity earlier. Something I think the film does brilliantly is depicts the generational nuances within the family, which brings a lot of authenticity to this project. What was that process like collaborating with the rest of your cast as you built that backstory?
Oh my gosh. We had such an incredible cast and crew. I mean, even the crew in itself, you look at the set design and the
Yeah.
details of the set design and the production design is always mind-blowing. Every time I watch the film, I'm like, the details and the cast, like you said, I got to work with some incredible actors. Notably, of course, Serena Boggs, who plays Hey Hey, who was amazing, 8 years old. I'm like, what was I doing at 8 years old? Like, not this, like adults can't even memorize lines and do what she did. She was so incredible. To go back to your question, the flashback scenes with me and my parents
Yeah.
was really great to shoot. I feel like the flashback scenes were really fun for me because it was such a contrast, obvious to current day Asha and what she was going through. And those scenes, to be honest, like really hit home. And I think they
Yeah.
hit home for a lot of children of immigrants, because this idea of expectation and Asian guilt, which we all know deep down in our core, even though it comes out of love and how much they love us and how much they want us to do better. But it was a really great experience to work with those actors, because I think everybody just came to set and brought their A game and were so professional, and it was really easy to click into those moments because it's just our life, normal life.
Definitely. And like you're just saying, the set design were so immersive. How helpful was that for you as you created this universe and dived into your character's shoes?
Oh my gosh, it was incredibly helpful. Like you said, it was so immersive. They built the set from the ground up, well, in a warehouse, but every single room and every single detail, like down to the dust on the mahjong tiles and stuff, I know were thought out when I was talking to our production designer. So the thoughtfulness of the set was so helpful for me, because yeah, when you're in that room, you're just like, this is my life, this is where I live, this is where I sleep. And every detail, when it came to covering up the mattress and the cupboard that was like a fake cupboard, and where I
Yeah.
hid cans and the cushions, they were so thoughtful. And I really appreciated that, because I know Josh put a lot of thought into that as well. He always said, so many of these survival films, the details are all wrong. Like, they don't actually show how somebody would go through their life and how they would survive. They just sort of like gloss over those details because it's movie magic. Like, you just assume they survived somehow. But all of those details, I mean, just like learning how to open the cupboard and the cushion and how would I put the ramen packets, all of these things really contributed to me being able to like immerse myself in that world.
Yeah, you have so many standout moments within the film. Is there a scene that you're really excited for your fans to see when this film drops?
I am very biased because I feel like the ending is
Mind
just,
blowing.
yeah, just very, I was going to say fun. It's not exactly fun, but it just was unexpected. And I got to do a lot of my own stunts, or all of my own stunts for the film, which was an opportunity I've never had before. So those scenes I'm particularly proud of. And we had an incredible stunt team to help coordinate and choreograph. And those scenes, when I saw the final result, I was very happy with, especially the ones where I'm submerged in water and fighting in the water, the submerged water room and stuff like that. I'm excited for people just to like see those redeeming scenes.
There's so many relevant and timely themes that this film tackles. Was there one in particular that hit home for you?
It's hard because when we shot it, like I said, COVID hadn't
Yeah.
happened yet. And now when I think about the film, I mean, that is for sure the thing that stands out the most, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I talked to my friends from Hong Kong, and so many of them have not been able to leave the country to see their family, because if they do, they have to come back for this 21-day quarantine and
Yeah.
isolated from people. And, those themes stand out very strong to me. But I think when I was shooting it in 2019, one of the things that me and Josh talked about a lot was the difference between surviving and living, how there's a really big difference. I think it's very easy for a lot of people when they go into that survival mode to kind of just coast, because
Mhm.
and coast in not necessarily a good way, coast in a stagnant way, because really all you're trying to do is get from day 1 to day 2 to day 3 and make it through. But there's a difference between that and actually living, living your life to your fullest potential, or living your life to be happy, or like living, like truly enjoying what life is. And I think that's one of the themes that's very clear for Asha pre and post Hey Hey. Pre Hey Hey, she was just surviving. It was just about getting water to drink from the rain, and how is she going to scavenge and find food? Versus when Hey Hey came into her life, she finally had an impetus and a purpose to maybe go out and look for help and go back to living her life.
May actually be the answer to this next question, but actors have always said that after each project, you take a little bit from each project that you work on. What would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned being a part of this project that you're going to bring to future ones?
I think the part of this project that I'll bring for sure is it was my very first title lead of a film, being #1 on a call sheet. And at the very beginning, I was, a little nervous. I was like, oh gosh, okay, I'm gonna be working every single day. Like, I carry this film. How is it gonna go? And when I finished the film, I really felt just so good about it. I was just like, I loved being #1 on the call sheet. And I loved that I was able to tell this story of an Asian female being the hero of my own story, and being able to carry the film and set the tone for, set every day and do the work and feel so confident and strong about my capabilities and my abilities. And I really am excited to bring that confidence into my projects moving forward as well.
You did such a brilliant job in the film. When it was over, I was like, no.
Oh,
I
thank
got
you.
one final question for you. Besides this project, you have a ton that you're working on right now. Are there any that you can talk about at this time?
Sure. So I play Sumi on Freeform's Good Trouble. We actually had our season 4 premiere yesterday on Freeform, and it'll be out on Hulu today. I love the character Sumi. It could not be more different than Asha from the Call Me On. Literally the polar opposite. It's such a great show. Like I said, we're on season 4, and Sumi, they've really developed my character throughout the
Yeah.
seasons to be so fun and so three-dimensional and so much more depth to her character than where I started kind of in season 1. So there's a lot of really exciting things coming up for Sumi in season 4, so everybody should check it out. And I also had the opportunity to work on Top Gun Maverick, which is the sequel to Top Gun, and it should be coming out this year in May. I never want to say for sure because it's been pushed so many times, but that was also an incredible experience to work on such a big blockbuster film, let alone one that is a sequel to such an iconic Americana film. So that was a very, very cool experience as well.